Já tens pessoal aí para passar por aqui, Helder.
Oh, já te coloquei como host, que é para ir passando enquanto eu termino essa configuração.
Yes, thanks. Motseki, how are you?
Bom dia.
Bom dia, Motseki.
Bom dia, Elder. How are you?
Bom dia, Mr. Motsek. How are you?
É bom. I'm very good, guys. How are you, guys? Eduardo.
Essa configuração.
Yes, thanks. Yes, I'm good. So we have to promote Tom, right?
Tom and Grant. And me. And Dr. Madala.
Madala is not here.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Where's my video?
And Jim?
Today it's Grant.
Okay.
So it's Tom and Grant.
Yes, Jim?
I'm sure they have joined. Who has joined? I can't see.
Hi, I'm Motseki, Eduardo,
Hi, Jim.
Helder.
Grant. That's
How are you?
Grant.
This is Jim here. I don't, you must. I'm just going to say, Motseki's right. I think you must promote Tom and Grant because they're going to be doing the presentation today.
Okay, I've done that already.
Thanks, guys.
And
Thank you.
Jim
Good
wants
morning.
to speak. I think it's...
No, it's okay. I just wanted
It's
to
Jim.
say hi.
It's Jim now. Yeah.
Ah,
Hi, Jim.
okay.
So we'll leave you there
Can you
as
guys
an
hear me?
attendee.
Hi, guys. I think Grant will be joining shortly.
Yes,
I'm
he's
in.
here.
Oh,
Yeah.
there he is.
Hi,
And
Grant.
Good morning, guys.
I updated the Google site with the feed from this session, and the link is in the chat, so you can copy and share with people who might be interested in watching, but it's not available to directly join to Zoom. So the feed is live.
Good morning, Helder. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, excellent.
Yes, we can
Excellent.
hear.
I just can't switch on my video. I think
No,
you've
Elder
blocked
has to promote you as co-host.
it. Okay, cool.
Elder.
Yes, I already promoted.
Elder, don't start the live feed now.
Okay.
Yeah, like the
Start
other
it
day.
when we start.
Okay.
Otherwise, you'll have to edit it.
Yeah, but no problem. It's better to have it already set it up. Then I can cut what doesn't interest. No problem.
Okay, super.
Super. I agree. Good morning, Motseki. How are you?
Morning, Prof. I'm fine, yourself.
Excellent. I cannot
How
complain
are
at
you
all. It
feeling
is a
today?
beautiful day. Sorry?
How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling on top of the world.
Ah, that's
Elder, you
great.
have to put us, all of us as co-hosts here, sorry.
Eduardo, are you saying something?
I was just saying, Elder, that he needs to put all of us here on panelists as co-hosts
Yeah.
Okay.
because of the video. Yeah.
Enable the video as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me get my jacket off so that I can look smart for Motseki.
Eduardo's on the beach.
and
Right.
from the library.
Yes. Eduardo, you're sitting on the beach. Okie dokie.
Yes, I'm on at the beach now.
Excellent. Excellent.
My video is not activated, guys.
I
Yeah,
see,
that's why I said Elder needs to promote you to co-host.
and Grant
Elder.
is not, we can't see Grant and we can't see Jim.
Yeah, no, Grant and Motseki need to be promoted, and Jim is not on this side, so he cannot project.
Okay.
Oh, that's okay.
Today, Jim is an attendee.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes. Yeah. He will have to raise his hand if he wants to talk.
I'll have to raise my hand, eh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Times have changed.
You get demoted very quickly in this
Yes,
game.
sis, yeah. She's
Jim, how is Johannesburg?
oh, it's cold, eh? It was, I think, -3 the other night.
Hey.
Yeah, no, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And we've also had load shedding, so it's quite nice when your heater doesn't work either. Yeah, so no, but it looks like it's getting better today. Are you in
Okay.
Gabs?
Yes, I'm in Gaps.
How's it there?
It's okay. Weather this side is normally very good. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a few big fronts coming through this year. I think they've had some good snow up in Lesotho. Yeah.
It's only cold in the evenings and in the mornings here.
No, that's nice. And clear skies, I'm guessing, every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, down this side, just to inform Eduardo, we've had some monster seas of about 7.5 meters, and we've had very strong wind. And but today is the first beautiful day after a number of days that were pretty horrible.
You had monster what?
Monster seas, Motseki, they're about 7-8 meters.
Like they had in Cape Town.
Yeah.
With that white foam.
Yeah,
with the white foam as well.
Yes.
Hey.
What happened at the mouth there, Tom?
The mouth of Market River, it came right over the sand dune into the river.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it was scary. I had to move my boat.
Is Grant there?
I'm here.
Excellent.
Okay. Can you start sharing the presentation so that we can see? Great.
That's really cool. Grant, I think you should turn up your volume a little bit.
How's this, Tom?
There we go.
That sounds very good.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Helda,
Yes, Mr. Motseki,
I can't stream the video. Eh?
you can't stream. Okay, can you try now? Now I can see you now.
Ah, I
Okay.
can see Motseki.
I can't see
Motseki,
myself.
won't you close that curtain behind you? Yeah, now I can see you. What a beautiful boy. I will also close this one behind me.
Did you promote Grant as
Yes,
well?
no, Grant has been promoted to presenter now.
Yeah,
But,
but his video.
Where's your video, Grant?
Yeah, I've tried to put it on, but it's not allowing.
No, you can try now, please.
No.
There we go.
There we go. There we go. We've got Grant, but now we don't have the presentation.
Let me try and bring it up again.
Perfect.
There we go.
Perfect. Now, where's Motseki? Oh, there he is. Okay, cool. So we all fair and square and we're organized. That's nice. That's nice. So have you had pretty good feedback from audiences, Motseki?
Yes, yes. In actual fact, Jim was looking for a report. I need to share.
Yes.
The one with email addresses and stuff like that. Helda sent it yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Motseki.
yeah. Yeah, but the feedback has been great.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
glad to hear that. Yeah.
It was top notch. So let's keep it that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Well, you'll hear Professor Grant Merrick speaking today. Hey, Grant?
Grant.
Yeah, it's we've got a lot to get through. I think we're on 47 slides, so we're going to have to move along.
Yeah. But that's okay. That's okay. We will manage it.
It's almost unfortunate that we are able to share so little, really, because it is just an overview. I think it doesn't do the detail justice, but I guess the participants will have access to the report finally, and they'll be able to delve into the detail in the report.
Yeah, because we will still have to translate the report.
Jesus.
Wow.
Wow.
And
Gonna-
and circulate it to member states.
Okay.
In November, we are going to have a technical committee meeting where we will validate the report and everything that you guys will be recommending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Jim, what's the current page number of total?
I think we're close to 400.
Yeah. This was a bigger thing that we didn't realize it was so big.
It's an encyclopedia of SADC aquaculture.
For sure.
Mm.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to get away from that when you've got 16 member states.
Yeah, this is the thing.
Yeah. We can edit it quite nicely, and I get an ISBN number for it, and it's published. Eh?
Yeah, that would be organized. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Now, where we will be focusing, Motseki, is in the executive summary, which in itself will be quite. It won't just be a sort of a 2 or 3 page document, but at least it will provide quite a bit of the detail, such that people don't have to read the entire report, but go to specific sections if they so wish.
Yeah, no, that's super.
Mm.
At least 2 days ago, I finished my self-quarantine.
Ah, nice.
You can
Nice.
see I'm all shaved now. I
see
could
that.
go to the salon now and get
So
some
you're running
pampering.
you're running around the streets again, but you must be careful, ne?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna lock myself for the whole week.
Yeah. But what happens with being there, Motseki? I mean, if you go out of the country, do you then have to quarantine in South Africa? And the same when you get back to Botswana?
Yes.
Really, eh?
Yeah. So I must have 28 days that I want to play with.
Yo. It's a different world, eh?
It is, yeah, it is.
Yeah. Totally disruptive.
But they have now banned travel again, so no one is allowed into Botswana.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what do the infection figures look like in Botswana?
They are very small.
Really, eh?
They experienced a surge of about 50-something cases in the
Yeah.
past few days. So I think that has put them on the back foot.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of these guys are your truck drivers, delivering essentials in Botswana, and those that are crossing to your Zambia and other countries, Malawi, they use normally the Botswana route. It's the easier than the Zimbabwe route. Yeah. So it's mainly those guys in the majority.
Okay.
Yeah. But they are worried that there might be local or community transmissions happening. So they're trying to manage that. If they can't manage that, they will be in the same situation as us back home.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to have a lot of South Africans coming into Botswana at the moment with a high rate of infection here.
Yeah. No, I think we have been listed as the high-risk country by WHO now.
Really, eh?
Yeah.
Sure.
Because the whole country is a hotspot now.
I think we six highest infections in the world.
Imagine.
And just
ago,
looking
we
at
were
the
number
numbers,
10.
yeah, by the end of the month, I'm sure we'll be in the top 5.
Yeah.
Oy. Scary.
It's not a good thing, eh?
No.
It's not a
It's
good
very
thing.
Scary. Very scary. I mean, you go out shopping, and when we come back from shopping, we put the stuff outside in the garden and then take our solution of Jik and just wipe down everything that we've purchased before we bring it into the house.
Yeah. And you should also change your clothes. Immediately put those in a washing machine.
Yeah.
And get into a shower.
Yo.
It's getting too administrative, eh?
Yeah. Terrible.
Ay.
Terrible,
Yeah.
terrible, terrible. Yeah. But no, yeah, what can you mark? You just got to hide and stay at home. So are we going to be starting off, and then are you going to ask me to introduce Grant Motseki?
Yes. If Madala joins, then I'll hand over to him as well.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's perfect. Will he be chairing again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. But if he's not joining, then I'll assume that responsibility.
Okay, that's cool.
It's almost the time, and I don't see people joining.
Really, eh? I had to go to one of the old emails to join because the
I
latest.
recirculate. I recirculate it again.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah. I see Etienne has joined. Welcome, Etienne.
Good morning, Etienne.
Am I supposed to promote him to, or just allow him to talk?
You can allow him to talk.
Yeah.
And I see Sloan has joined, and Julie.
Good
So
morning,
Jim,
everybody.
you're no longer alone there.
Good morning. Nice to join you guys.
Morning, Etienne. Morning.
Morning, Etienne.
Good morning,
Etienne,
folks.
Sloans, how are you?
I'm okay. It's freezing here in Lilongwe, freezing.
Really?
Morning, Sloans, really?
Prof, how are you on the coast? You must be warm there. I can see.
It's a bit better, Sloans. It's a bit better. Today, the temperature will be about 23, 24.
Hey, I wish I could come there and eat prawns with you.
Hey,
Stay away from prawns. There is a report that came that some shrimps were found to have COVID in China.
No, but Prof, he lives on a river, a small river, which is clean. So we go and catch them.
Sloans, before you joined, we were talking about the situation in South Africa. So there's no longer a small river.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Hey, this disease is going to finish us.
Yeah.
Motseki, I see this morning we were up to number 6 in the world with number of cases.
Yes, Grant was just saying now.
Yeah.
And the trouble, you guys have banned the beer, so hey, you're really a waste place to be.
Massive mistake.
I see Beatrice has joined. Beatrice, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes.
How are you?
Good morning.
I'm good. And you?
No, we are good.
Good morning, Beatrice.
John
Oh,
has
good
joined.
morning. Good morning. Is it John or Dr. Chimati?
Yeah, Dr. Chimatiro here in Lilongwe. Are you still in Bujumbura, Beatrice?
Yes. Yes. I'm still in Bujumbura.
Good.
Maybe
Aquaculture
Beatrice, we need to set up a webinar for Lake Tanganyika just to give us a brief on what is happening in terms of fisheries and aquaculture there.
Yep. That will
And
be
also
good.
you can brief us about the EcoFish project. I know EU has really supported you guys together with Lake Victoria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. They are
So we need
supporting
to
us.
give you a
really.
platform to update us.
Okay. Today
Yeah, but
or
we will discuss. Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Sometime in a month or two.
Okay.
Great.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. ATN is listening.
But
Welcome, Julie.
Hi, it's actually not Julie, it's Rachel. I'm using Julie's her Zoom account.
How are you, Rachel?
Good, thanks. How are you, Motseki? I'll just be here for half an hour, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks for joining.
What are you doing training today, Rachel?
Yes.
Okay, good luck with the training. Eh?
Thank you, Prof.
We also have John Ford. John.
Yes, Motseki, how are you doing?
I'm good, yourself?
Keep you well. That's a cool guy here in Cape Town.
Yes, geez, I saw that storm. Really, it nearly buried you guys at
Sea Point.
at Sea Point Aquarium.
Morning, John. Morning, John.
Morning. Yeah, it's much better now. The sun is out, things are drying out, going back to normal.
Okay.
Yeah, Motseki,
welcome.
thank you. I'll be interested in, as we go through the value chain, obviously at the last session, there was a lot of concerns about bureaucracy, which I totally agree with. As you know, just for the rest of the panel, I'm responsible for developing food safety programs. I'm very wary of bureaucracy being a farmer myself, abalone farmer. So it'd be good if we can try and find a balance between having to meet regulatory requirements, but also streamlining requirements for the industry to make it cost effective and efficient.
That's true.
Come up again, John. You say?
The concern is having to meet international and national food safety requirements is very onerous, but we don't want to develop the programs to be so complex and expensive to make it ineffective for farms to implement or too costly for the farms to implement. Especially as we go into the freshwater sector that's scattered all throughout South Africa, which I think is common for most of the African countries or SADC countries. It becomes very difficult to monitor such scattered farms. If farms are all concentrated in one area, you can have sort of cooperatives, which will be quite useful. You can sort of test, but if they're all scattered, it makes it very difficult. Each farm still has to be tested.
Okay.
Okay.
Blessing. Welcome.
Thank you, Motseki. Greetings, Grant and Tom. Greetings.
Morning, Blessing.
Morning.
And I also see Prof. Kaunda has joined.
Excellent. Morning, Automatic.
Mr. Mori. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, have a nice day. Okay.
Thank you.
And my colleague Kalicias has joined as well.
Oh, wonderful.
Kalicias.
Good morning, everyone. And yeah, I was just coming out of a meeting, so hence I could not connect.
Great.
Good morning, Kalisia. I'm glad you could join. Yeah, John, your comment is a very valid one, and this is something which will be addressed in the third webinar of this series, where we're looking at the roadmap going forward, which is one of the things that will be addressed in quite some detail.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, so that's next week, Friday at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, you cannot miss it.
Yeah, you cannot miss that one. And I see Mrs. German has joined. Chimwemwe, welcome.
Morning, guys. How are you?
Prof,
we
are good.
Hey.
Hey,
Yeah, great.
Morning, Prof.
Great.
Automatic.
Nice to see you.
Yes.
Guys, thank you very much. Hey.
Thanks, Emmanuel.
Yes. Good.
Yeah.
Thank
now
you.
that the Prof has joined, Malawi is represented.
Exactly.
Sloan's
but guys, Motseki, Dr. Motseki, we just had some fish kills from our lake 2 days ago.
We just had
some fish kills.
Oh,
where?
Lord.
Fish kills. Yeah.
Where?
We're still investigating what actually happened, but it's quite sad.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where, Emmanuel?
Around Bua River.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the lake or in the river?
I think it's maybe the river mouth, somewhere there.
Okay. Yeah, that could be one of a multiple of case or causes, eh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Morning, Prof. It's Etienne. That fish kill, was it specific to some species or just across the board of all?
It seems across, but mostly the catfishes. Most of the catfishes.
All right, thanks, Prof. Yeah, I'm just interested. I don't have a solution. It could be anything.
But we'll update you as we get the results out. Yeah.
Guys, in 2 minutes, I'm starting this webinar.
Okay.
I think people who are joining, they'll find us on the way. Grant, are you ready?
Absolutely.
Great.
Looking forward to sharing some interesting findings.
Yeah. Helder.
Is it Motegi? Yes, Motegi?
Yeah, we are almost starting. Huh?
We can start.
Yeah.
This is already live, huh?
Yeah, it's already live. So guys, welcome to the SADC Aquaculture webinar series. This is the second webinar in the series. And as we have witnessed in the previous webinar, that aquaculture production in the SADC region has increased significantly over the past 10 to 15 years. And that it was reported that there are a range of different species that are being produced using a number of different production systems. And because these are different, they also require different levels of expertise and technology. So now, given the increasing demand of fish and fish products in the region, and also the stagnating supply from capture fisheries, both regionally and globally, as it has been indicated in the State of the World Report on Fisheries and Aquaculture that FAO released last month. There is a significant potential for further growth in the aquaculture sector. It also came out strong in the previous webinar that interventionist approaches at smallholder level have failed to increase national fish supply. They have also failed to generate wealth and reduce poverty, mostly in rural areas. It was also reported that major successes that have been recorded in the SADC region have been achieved through private sector-driven, market-led, and commercial aquaculture ventures. So today, we continue with the dialogue to further identify potential value chains in the region that could support sustainable aquaculture development. I would like to give Prof. Hecht 2 minutes to introduce Grant, who is one of the project technical persons, as well as Prof. A chance to introduce the other members you couldn't introduce last week.
Thank you, Motegi, and welcome everybody to this second webinar in our series of 3. I would just like to introduce Grant, who will be making the presentation today. Grant is a member, as I am, of Advance Africa, and he specializes in the assessment of economic feasibility of new and existing aquaculture, fisheries, and agriculture businesses. He's really become a renowned expert in these fields. Grant has an MBA from the Open University in the UK, which he received, I think, around about 2008, and in excess of around about 25 years of experience in operational and general management of large agricultural and aquaculture businesses. Not only in terms of his knowledge is not only book-based or desk-based. Grant is and was a hands-on man managing large agricultural operations and aquaculture operations. So he has first-hand experience in assessing new businesses and particularly business approaches. He was recently the leader of a World Bank project that Advance Africa got from the World Bank, and that was looking at the fisheries value chains in the African Great Lakes region. That certainly stands him in great stead for what he did in this particular project, particularly as regards the evaluation and analysis of the value chains that have been identified in this particular project. So yeah, that is Grant. He is, as I said, he's our expert in aqua businesses and agribusiness within Advance Africa. Last week we had Jim, who presented the second half of our webinar. Jim holds a master's degree from Rhodes University in ichthyology and fisheries science. And he's been well mentored, seeing that I was there too. So, and yeah, Jim has really made headway in terms of assessing aquaculture opportunities within the region, within SADC and outside of SADC. Most recently, we assessed the aquaculture opportunities along the coast of Kenya, for example, which was also a World Bank fund project. So, but nevertheless, without further ado, Grant, can I pass on to you to present the second webinar in our series? Thank you, Motseki.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom, and wonderful to have this opportunity. Welcome to all the participants. We've got a lot to get through this morning or this afternoon for some of you, so I will try to keep it relatively brief. But before we move on too far, I would just like to start with some thank yous, particularly to our country focal points. I know that we have harassed you at times, but the quality of feedback which has been really forthcoming from the country focal points has been fantastic, and really a big thank you to you all, and of course to SADC for making this study possible, our sub-consultants, and the many other stakeholders that we've engaged along the way, including operators, academics, institutions, etc. So a big thank you to you all. This part of the study really does look, as Tom has introduced, into the aquaculture value chains in SADC. And just to give you some context in terms of our objectives, you can see the highlighted red objectives are the ones that were addressed primarily to understand the status quo of the major species group in SADC member states, to understand risk price setting and technologies used within the value chains, and finally to evaluate the key constraints and drivers and opportunities for aquaculture value chain expansion. So that was the main objectives that we aimed to really guide us in this component of the work. In terms of the overall project approach, once again, the highlighted markers are the ones that we have really focused on here. To profile the species clusters, we introduced the idea of the species clusters in the last webinar. I'll take you through those again shortly. To identify issues that support or constrain aquaculture development within those value chains. And finally, to prioritize the value chains in terms of their potential for expansion. And very importantly, to put together an estimate of production potential for SADC as a region. This was a really key component of the work, in that I think perhaps for the first time we aimed to actually reduce down and quantify what a 10-year vision for SADC aquaculture would look like. And we'll be dealing with that as we go through the different value chains. So that's the component of our approach which we are dealing with. The final bullet point will be dealt with next week, which is the priority action roadmap, which has been informed by this component of work, and of course the previous webinar, which looked at the country profiles. So just to recap, 8 aquaculture species clusters have been identified within the region as being of importance. Running through them quickly: the tilapia cluster, mainly in Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Mozambique, and mainland Tanzania, incorporating both cage, pond, and other types of culture. The salmonid cluster, which is rainbow trout driven at this stage in Lesotho and South Africa. The abalone cluster in South Africa and Namibia. The crustacean cluster incorporating Madagascar, Tanzania, and Mozambique. Bivalves in South Africa and Namibia. The marine finfish cluster, mainly Mauritius, Tanzania, and we also looked at emergent value chains in both Seychelles and South Africa. We have the seaweed cluster in Tanzania, mainly Zanzibar and Madagascar, and finally the pearl cluster in Seychelles and Tanzania. And I think important, as has been mentioned previously, when looking at this series of clusters, SADC really does stand out in terms of an opportunity due to this basket of, let's say, species, which in turn accommodate technologies to be applied at small and commercial scales for different market segments to be targeted. And I think that it presents a robust opportunity as opposed to the monoculture which defines many of the developed aquaculture countries in the world at the moment. Within those clusters, we have identified 24 value chains. Those value chains have been categorized primarily through species, the type of technology which has been applied, and the areas of significance in which production is taking place. We're going to deal with each of them as we go through the presentation, but as means of an introduction, in the tilapia cluster, we have primarily the cage production value chains in Lake Kariba, Cahora Bassa, Tanganyika, Victoria, Chambo in Malawi. We then identified tilapia pond value chains in both a commercial and smallholder scale, and finally a tilapia wrasse value chain. In the salmonid cluster, we have rainbow trout produced in Lesotho and the same rainbow trout produced in South Africa. In the abalone cluster, we have a single value chain, being the South African Namibia value chain. In crustaceans, we have prawns Madagascar, prawns Tanzania, and mud crabs. In bivalves, we have mussels in South Africa and Namibia. We have Pacific oysters in South Africa and Namibia. In the finfish cluster, we have the Mauritius red drum value chain, milkfish Tanzania value chain, and the Seychelles finfish value chain. In the seaweed cluster, we have seaweed Tanzania, seaweed Madagascar, and finally in the pearl cluster, we have black pearl Seychelles and half pearls Zanzibar. So those incorporate the value chains in which we have studied, 24 in total. And again, for a little bit of context, in terms of how this component of the study fits into the overall objectives of the overall study, we've looked at the country profiles. At this point, we're looking at value chains. Those value chain analyses are really driving production targets that could be achieved, we feel, in the next 10 years in SADC, and those in turn are informing a SADC aquaculture vision. That SADC aquaculture vision, we are putting a quantification to in terms of potential production, and ultimately that is what is defining the actions which are ultimately made up in terms of the priority action roadmap, which we will deal with next week. So for each aquaculture value chain, we have created a profile. Unfortunately, we won't be able to go into all of the details because we simply don't have the time today, but to give you a little bit of an idea on the type of things that we've looked at, obviously significant production locations, technologies, product development in terms of processing, quality, the level of certification which is currently being applied. We have looked at the different activities within the value chains, all the way from inputs through to retail. We have developed mass flow value chains, which we will have a look at now, as well as geospatial maps, which are being used primarily to identify bottlenecks that could become issues as production is increased. To the right of the screen, you see an example of a geospatial map indicating the movement of product from production all the way through to retail in different areas. So for each value chain, we have created a geospatial map, and we have also, as I mentioned earlier, done for each value chain a mass flow value chain diagram. And that really is taking each component of production all the way from the primary producer through to retail, and it ends up looking something like this. Once again, we're not going to have the time to go through the detail, but this sort of detail will be available in the final report, and you will all be welcome to look through and see how best we have tried to define what is currently happening in the different value chains as a means of informing what could happen into the future. So we see in this one, this is rainbow trout in Lesotho, going from live harvest through to primary processing, then different quantities of production going into either secondary processing or perhaps into in-house retail opportunities, and ultimately into export regional market breakdowns. So it is our hope that that this sort of information will really guide decision making as we move forward. A different example, this is the tilapia cage Lake Kariba value chain. Once again, looking at the ramp up of value, which is always very important to see how value chains work in terms of creating value and obviously opportunities for employment along the way. But as I say, those we're not going to go into today. They will be available in the final report. Today, we are really going to focus on the prioritization of aquaculture value chains. That is really as a mechanism to inform decision-making going forward as to which of the value chains which really should be prioritized for interventions of all types. And when looking at the potential for expansion in a value chain, we recognized that there were two key things. Number one being the potential for the sustainable expansion of production within the value chain. And secondly, the potential for the sustainable expansion of demand. Very often, I speak for myself as a farmer, we focus on production and marketing, and the demand for that particular product are often treated as secondary, but demand is an important issue, and therefore we felt that putting the two of them, plotting the two of these different factors on a matrix was probably the best way of rapidly assessing 24 different value chains in terms of which of those that really offer long-term sustainable expansion as opposed to those that don't. When looking at the potential for sustainable production, expansion of production, we have followed the ecosystems approach to aquaculture, starting with the physical capacity for expansion. That really is looking at, in terms of lakes, dams, coastlines, different types of opportunities for sites, what is available. We then looked at the productive capacity for expansion, in terms of what do those sites offer as a means of, or a calculation of total capacity in terms of tons per annum. We then looked at ecological capacity. So given a particular site which has a particular capacity for production, what is the actual ecological capacity to absorb that production? And finally, we've looked at social capacity in terms of, does the surrounding set of stakeholders support the further expansion of aquaculture or resist it? And economic capacity, really there we looked at, is there an economic rationale which has been fixed in terms of why production would be sensible to pursue and expand based on the economic profitability generated. When looking at the sustainable expansion of demand, we have looked at just a simple gross factor of what is the potential in terms of expanding consumer demand. And then we have added in different factors in terms of the ease of market access. I think this is a very key point which we will see as we move through the different value chains. Increasingly, consumer demand is potentially happening quite a long way away from where production is happening, and resolving market access can be a key issue going forward. We've also looked at the potential for value creation within a value chain. If there are opportunities to add value, this is often considered to be a very important component. And finally, we've looked at the absence of competition. We must realize that as protein producers, aquaculture products are equally looked at in the context of other proteins, and we must have a product which ultimately offers the consumer value for money. So based on those different factors, we have scored each value chain, and we have plotted them onto a matrix, which many of you are now becoming familiar with in terms of an approach to rapidly assessing different things. But we have within our matrix a number of different categories, starting with deprioritized value chains. These are value chains that offer very limited opportunity for either the expansion of production or market demand. A deprioritized value chain is not necessarily one which is unimportant. It is simply a value chain which has already been expanded towards a natural limit. And with deprioritized value chains, your development strategy going forward would be to maintain existing volumes and to build in robustness. We then have the enhancement value chain category. These are projects or value chains which have scored medium and low values, and clearly are not yet ready for absolute development, but are rather should be enhanced towards either a niche value chain in terms of production or market limitations. Our developmental value chains are really the key which is forming the potential for future development. They are medium to high in terms of their opportunities for both the expansion of production and demand. However, there were some bottlenecks which have been identified perhaps, and our development strategy for those value chains would really be to identify bottlenecks, to address those bottlenecks, and ultimately to expand the value chain. Finally, we have prioritized value chains. These are the value chains that offered the highest scores in both the potential for expansion of production and the potential for expansion of demand. And the strategy towards those value those value chains is really immediate investment and expansion. So that was the way that we have categorized value chains in order to prioritize those which should be put to the top of the list for immediate interventions and support. And we now start moving through the different clusters. The tilapia cluster, as we've mentioned, comprises several different value chains. These are already the most important value chains in SADC. Current production volumes estimated at somewhere around 38,400 tons, comprising mainly Nile tilapia, but there are other species which are being investigated and used at the moment. The production systems, as we know, are diverse all the way from small scale through to industrial scale. The benefits of tilapia production all the way from real economic powerhouses through the industrial projects through to a very important role in the contribution to food and nutrition security. Biophysically, we have a very large portion of SADC, which is highly conducive to tilapia farming and can easily support further expansion. So how did we evaluate these value chains? As we see, when looking at our cage culture value chains, they all fitted very favorably into the developmental category, and particularly with Lake Victoria cage value chain, even into the prioritized category. So the cage production of tilapia, obviously a very important component of aquaculture in SADC going forward. We see existing profitability, which has been well demonstrated by industrial scale operations. There is significant physical and social capacity. In none of the value chains did we find that there was any particular resistance from stakeholders to further expansion. And ultimately, the product produced does seem to fit a particular niche. It is important to note that if one is looking at the matrix, we see that all of the value chains really are in the high category of potential for expansion of production, whereas they are in the medium category, with the exception of Lake Victoria, in terms of market. And I think this is an important point which will be recurring, which is we should not underestimate the importance of addressing access to market, market constraints, and how we ultimately market SADC aquaculture product to consumers regionally and internationally. So if having a quick look at this, I would say we are likely to reach a market cap before we run out of new opportunities to develop production. Continuing, looking at our pond tilapia value chains, these were split into commercial and smallholder scales. They were really indistinguishable in terms of opportunity, and both of them fitting very favorably into the prioritized grouping. The question, why are they there and marked higher than cage production? Really, I think there are two key issues which were identified. Number one, lower capital costs, lower operational costs, and ultimately the opportunity to potentially produce a product at a lower price than cage culture systems. And secondly, biophysically, the opportunities for pond development are almost unlimited within the region. We deprioritized the RAS tilapia value chain. I know that it is being developed in certain areas, but ultimately at a SADC scale, we do not see this value chain really having much opportunity to contribute to volumes. High operational costs, high capital costs. It's a complex method of production, and ultimately there are very favorable environmental conditions offered by the region, and therefore we see really RAS tilapia production not really filling a particular gap into the future. So if we consolidate our views on the tilapia value chains, we see them really fitting between prioritized and developmental. And our best estimates indicate that by 2030, we could see a 282% increase up to somewhere around 150,000 tons per annum. There are many interventions which will be required in order for that to be achieved. But I think that we should take Egypt's success story as something of an indicator giving perspective as to what can be achieved. And by all accounts, there is no reason why we shouldn't follow suit in SADC. As we've seen, we have the opportunity in terms of sites potential. So 150,000 tons certainly we see as a realistic target for the tilapia cluster in the coming 10 years. The salmonid cluster value chains are made up of two, rainbow trout Lesotho and rainbow trout in South Africa. In Lesotho, the production range at the moment appears to be between 1,003 and 3,000 tons per annum. Production takes place within the Lesotho Highlands Water Project, and there are currently 2 cage culture operations in the Katsi Dam. Supply is to local, regional, and even to export markets, including Japan. In South Africa, production is currently estimated as just over 1,500 tons per year. Production is rather in intensive raceways, tank farms, and mainly focused in the cool, high altitude areas. The farms are smaller in scale, mainly family owned, and there is an additional component of the value chain which is really focused on the exportation of locally bred and produced ova. Our valuation for the salmonid value chains, the rainbow trout South Africa value chain was classified as deprioritized, mainly due to, number one, very limited sites that will likely offer expansion potential. There is one rider to that, which is Saldanha Bay. There is experimentation happening in the bay at the moment, but as yet that opportunity remains unproven. We also see that the South African market is quite congested and really offers limited potential for expansion going forward. The rainbow trout Lesotho value chain was classified as enhancement. Really, the key difference there being that the introduction of a 3rd dam into the Lesotho Highlands Water Project will potentially offer increased capacity within the dams for further expansion. And what has been proven is that there is some potential for the export of cage-reared trout from Lesotho to markets such as Japan, although that is limited to the demand for only large fish. which can only be produced in small quantities in Lesotho at the moment. So in terms of the salmonid cluster, the combination is that there is potential for expansion, potentially by 54% over the coming 10 years. But really that is mainly focused in the Lesotho projects and will be very much dependent on the completion of the third dam in the Lesotho Highlands Water Project system. The abalone value chain cluster is made up of a single value chain, which is the abalone South Africa and Namibia value chain. Current production is estimated at somewhere around 1,500 tons per year, and that has been driven by 12 major enterprises. It is worth noting that there are 5 pilot scale ranching operations. These ranching operations, if they prove successful, would definitely present a very interesting new potential for the expansion of production. In Namibia, there is one operation at 100 tons a year, and that is essentially considered very similar to the South African value chain, as it uses the same logistics to really supply the same markets. In terms of evaluation of the value chain, we placed the value chain as a niche value chain with a market limit. As much as there are definitely sites that are open and would provide very good potential for further expansion of production, at the moment, market is somewhat saturated. There is a lot of production which is commenced in places like Korea and China itself. And definitely the further expansion of production would have to be led by an opening of new markets. So abalone, very much a niche value chain. There is potential for expansion. We have estimated that 2,200 could be achieved by 2030. But as I've mentioned, key to that would be opening new markets and building on different market opportunities other than the current single market value chain which abalone is focused on. The bivalve cluster value chains are made up by mussels in South Africa and Namibia and oysters in South Africa and Namibia. Mussels in Namibia previously farmed in Walvis Bay. At the moment, nothing is happening there. In South Africa, Saldanha Bay, it was impressive to see that there has been some increase in production from those producers. Oysters, again, South Africa and Namibia. In South Africa, again, Saldanha Bay, somewhere around 380 tons. In Namibia, 180 tons produced in Walvis and Luderitz. Both value chains supply local and regional markets, but some exports from Namibia are taking place. Production technologies are well known, well established, and there is opportunity for participation by smaller commercial operators. In terms of our valuation, the value chain was put into the niche market limit category. And yeah, the oysters, we felt that the regional and local markets are niche, they are high end, it is an expensive product, and we see limited opportunity for further expansion of that market. Mussels, on the other hand, have definitely indicated expansion over the past years. There is significant opportunity for the further production expansion, and therefore the mussel value chain was classified as developmental. Overall, there can definitely be some further expansion in particularly mussels, and we see 7,000 tons as being a realistic target to be achieved by 2030. A key constraint to mussels is our current limitation in terms of export markets, and of course, EU certification and the ability to access EU markets would entirely change the game for mussels. That is something to be certainly considered into the future, but as it stands, 7,000 tons is where we see a realistic limit being for 2030. Crustacean cluster value chains, we have prawns in Madagascar, prawns in Tanzania, and mud crabs. Black tiger prawns being produced in Madagascar and Tanzania really are re-emerging after some difficult years due to disease issues. In Madagascar, 6 operators and somewhere around 5,400 tons currently being produced. In Tanzania, 1 operator on Mafia Island at about 340 tons. Mud crab farming is very niche. We estimate not more than 10 tons currently being cultivated in mangrove areas, really as fattening projects. Those are all rather small scale and pilot at the moment. In terms of our evaluation, for both prawns in Tanzania and Madagascar, we scored the value chains as developmental. The markets are niche, but on the other hand, they are well established and are robust. And most certainly, we did identify large areas that would be favorable for further development of production. The mud crab value chain was deprioritized. It is very niche. There is very low potential for expansion. And I think most importantly, the game changer for mud crabs would be a development of hatchery technology such that the reliance on wild harvest would not be continued. Overall, we see a potential 167% increase in production, mainly being achieved through the production of prawns in Madagascar and to a lesser extent Tanzania. The marine finfish cluster made up of 3 value chains: the Mauritius red drum value chain, the milkfish Tanzania value chain, and the emergent finfish value chains in South Africa and the Seychelles. Currently, Mauritius has a single commercial operator producing red drum in cages, somewhere around 2,000 tons at the moment. There's been a recent expansion of that operator into offshore sites, which is very exciting. In Tanzania, milkfish are farmed on a small-scale subsistence basis. And in South Africa and Seychelles, there have been a number of developments in terms of the production of finfish. Seychelles is due to launch its sector still this year. And in South Africa in particular, yellowtail and cob production is taking place at a small scale as we speak. In terms of our evaluations, the red drum in Mauritius value chain was prioritized. There is good physical capacity to expand production in the offshore sites. And at this stage, it seems to be very technically and economically viable. Already, there is access to EU and US markets, which are indicating great demand for the product. Milkfish Tanzania value chain was deprioritized. It is likely to remain a small-scale subsistence-based value chain. And the Seychelles marine finfish value chain was categorized as developmental. In the Seychelles, there is significant potential for expansion of production, similar to Mauritius, a pristine environment, and some very high-value candidate species, including snappers and groupers. All in all, in summary, marine finfish, as much as it is very emergent at the moment, we see huge potential and we could see as much as 20,000 tons of production being added in the coming 10 years. So that would be a value chain which would really offer huge potential even beyond 2030. At the moment, in Mauritius, there is a very good blueprint, let's call it, for production which is established. We expect similar will be created in Seychelles in the coming years. And in both of those instances, the potential for production and expansion beyond 10,000 tons each, which we have estimated, is definitely there and is significant. The seaweed cluster, at the moment, based on the production of 2 seaweed species, Eucuma and Capifycus, and production taking place in Tanzania, predominantly Zanzibar, and Madagascar. Eucuma currently dominates production at somewhere around 99%, but is farmed in shallow intertidal areas and definitely is facing difficulties in terms of climate change, which is bringing about increasingly warm waters. There is very little value addition which is being currently undertaken within SADC, and at the moment it is simply seaweed which is being dried and exported as a raw material. Small volumes of alva are being produced in Namibia and South Africa, but that really is by commercial abalone farmers, and the production is inextricably linked to the abalone value chain. In terms of our evaluations, seaweed Tanzania was classified as an enhancement value chain, particularly in consideration of issues which are currently constraining production being climate change based. Seaweed Madagascar was classified as developmental. In Madagascar, already deep water farming techniques are being used for the high value Capifycus. And as much as the market is a competitive place, there are definitely opportunities for further expansion there. In terms of our summary of seaweed cluster, we see a marginal increase of somewhere around 20% over the coming 10 years, and that is very dependent on further R&D into mitigations which can offset the impacts of climate change, and in particular the development of more deep water farming technologies. The pearl cluster comprises 2 value chains, the black pearl Seychelles value chain and the half pearl Zanzibar value chain. In Seychelles, there is currently 1 operation which is producing black pearls. The quality of those pearls are excellent and they are sold locally and internationally. And in Tanzania, production of half pearls is taking place mainly on a small scale basis and sold into the local tourist market. In terms of our evaluations, black pearl Seychelles was classified as a developmental value chain. Most certainly it is a high value and a product which is in great demand. There are many suitable sites which could be utilized for further development of expansion of production. And there is, of course, a massive opportunity for value addition within the value chain through the creation of jewelry. The half pearl Tanzania value chain was deprioritized. It is a low value product, and we see very little opportunity to expand that market beyond the local tourist market. In summary, we see that the production of pearls could increase by as much as 100% by 2030. And certainly it would be a significant addition to the SADC value chains to have a very high value non-food value chain, adding to diversity, and certainly would help to market the SADC aquaculture opportunity in general. We did note a number of emergent value chains, dusky cob and yellowtail in South Africa, not yet really at a commercial scale, but certainly there is progress being made, and in particular yellowtail is looking interesting from an investment perspective. Collector urchin in Seychelles and in South Africa, there are currently experimentations being taking place, and those would be primarily for the production of uni to be exported to Japan. It is a significant market, so the development of that in terms of technologies and in particular cost-effective feeds would look as critical drivers of that value chain into the future. Three-spot tilapia certainly would be an opportunity to open up different areas of potential production in Botswana and in the western part of Zambia, where now tilapia cannot be used. And finally, there is opportunity for cage culture in other lakes and reservoirs throughout SADC, which are currently not being used or experimented on. Overall, we see 10 of our value chains falling into the developmental category, which is extremely encouraging. 4 are prioritized, and we then see 2 in enhancement, 2 in niche, and only 4 value chains were finally deprioritized. Once again, deprioritization doesn't mean that those value chains are not of consequence or importance. It simply means that the opportunity for further expansion has been viewed as limited. Overall, there we see what the future potential could look like, with a total number coming to somewhere around 355,000 tons that could be achieved by 2030. It is a significant number. Overall, we see that if we take an average of the scores that were applied to the different value chains, once again, we see a higher potential for expansion of production than potential for expansion of demand. So we should not underestimate the importance of developing market offtake, consumer demand as a real driver of the potential of aquaculture in SADC going forward. And finally, if we have a look at the different value chains and their contribution, once again, we see the outstanding importance of tilapia cluster in the overall. That really is where the focus needs to be. In terms of value, very interestingly, our best estimates indicate we have somewhere around $210 million in farm gate sales, translating to 353 in retail sales. At our future 2030 production forecasts, that would move to somewhere around 655 million in farm gate sales and 924 in retail sales, making aquaculture a very significant sector within the SADC area. There is no doubt that at 355,000 tons, the impact on food security will be significant. The current FAO estimation is that by the late 2020s, there will be as much as a 574,000 ton deficit within SADC. 355,000 tons does not fill that gap, and therefore it is important to note that importation of fisheries and aquaculture products is likely to be something that the region relies on for some time to come. In terms of further considerations for expansion, absolutely there are certain themes which we cannot avoid, sustainability being absolutely at the top of the list. I think this is an issue which has come up in previous discussions in our last webinar, that we need to expand aquaculture, but we need to ensure that the ecosystems approach is followed, and that we develop aquaculture in an environmentally and socially sustainable manner. The importance of aquaculture in addressing food security equally cannot be underestimated. And very importantly, we need to ensure that our projects going forward merge the issues of affordability and demand. Unless we are able to produce in a manner that gives us a product which is affordable, we will not be addressing food security and will not be achieving that goal. Economic dynamics, very important that we ensure that the further expansion of aquaculture is done in an inclusive manner, and that equitable access is really allowed and encouraged to all groups, including vulnerable groups. In particular, the importance of women and youth in aquaculture going forward does need to be addressed. And we should not underestimate the current importance of the emerging blue economy globally, and the fact that SADC aquaculture can very much play a key component in that. Finally, in conclusion, we've seen that there is a high expansion, as we expected, potential within the value chains in SADC. The opportunities for growth are across a number of different species clusters, locations, technologies, and scales. This is really important. I think building robustness into the SADC aquaculture segment is critical, and using different species definitely is a means of creating that robustness and avoiding the monoculture which we see in many of the developed countries at the moment. Most pressing need at the moment is finding a market solution. It is easy to talk about a deficit which we are not yet showing an answer to fulfilling, but on the other hand, accessing markets is important. We see definitely complications in terms of getting product from the areas in which it is produced to consumers in the areas of high demand as being a key driver or problem going forward. And finally, there are, of course, a number of issues which need to be considered in finding those market solutions, particularly in terms of what is happening in terms of fisheries supply, what is happening in terms of imports which are coming into the region, certifications, eco-labels, branding, best practice. We've already talked a little bit about that in the last webinar. Where do we find the balance between really increasing bureaucracy as opposed to enabling further expansion? There is definitely evidence that the domestic markets are very sufficient in terms of opportunities going forward, as long as we adequately develop them and find ways of getting product to those markets in a cost-effective manner. And finally, market intelligence, we are seeing time again as being a major constraint which is discussed by potential investors. There is a lack of surety there as to what offtakes really would be. And I think developing opportunities for collating market intelligence and coming up with real quantified opportunities in terms of volumes is absolutely critical. At the moment, the development of the sector has largely been on a silo type of approach with different projects popping up in different areas. There is absolutely no doubt that going forward, a fully coordinated plan which considers developmental hubs, which will allow activities such as feed manufacture and supporting infrastructure to be developed alongside production is absolutely critical. So in terms of the way forward, we have in this session covered the value chains. We have offered a production target that could be achieved by 2030. And in our next section, we will put together the roadmap, which gives an outline, a set of guidelines as to how that vision could be realized and what sort of interventions are going to be required in order to ensure that that does take place. Thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Grant. You really can talk, eh? Almost an hour.
It was a lot to get through, Motseki. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. No, you did well. You did well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Prof. Heft, do you want to add something?
Tom, you are on mute.
Thank you. No, Motseki, I don't want to say anything except thanks to Grant. Well put together and very well thought through. Yeah, very exciting stuff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, do you have any questions, observations, comments on the presentation that was just given by Grant?
I see there are
I
some
have
hands.
3 hands. Who was first? Okay, maybe Mr. Mori.
Yeah, good morning again, or good afternoon. Thanks, Grant. Your presentation was of high caliber, high professionalism. I just want, if you can try to explain to me a bit about introduction of imported species for marine aquaculture development. If I take the Mauritius case, it's not a native one, it's an imported one. And can that be foreseen in future in the region? The second aspect is that in the value chain component, we all know the level of development in most of the African countries, and we all know about till now, we say that the small scale one, they have failed. And is there not a possibility of trying to drive them towards a kind of cooperatives in that business for, let's say, crab culture, if we can get these people alongside the mangrove areas to do the business? But the most important thing for aquaculture per se, I know it's difficult, it's sustain its activities through hatcheries, and due to the fact that capture fisheries is stagnating, where do you contemplate the feed formulation strategy to sustain the value chain production? These are just my queries, but I must thank you for you've been very clear, concise, precise in all the aspects of your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mori. Let's have, before you, Grant, let's have Blessing.
Thank you, Motseki, and thank you so much, Grant. Very insightful and concise. Yeah, looking at this Vision 2030 of ours, I was looking at, a list of, species that we have, and one of the previous webinars from, was it from Tanzania? They were talking quite highly on sea cucumbers. I was wondering, what's your take on it, the future potential as we move forward? The second one, which I then picked, was on ornamentals, because over the years we have seen that there's quite some more significant, in particular, values coming out of the trade of ornamental aquaculture. And then lastly, perhaps Tom could answer this one. There was this whole wave of excitement when we had, was it a year ago or about 6 months ago, that Lesotho plans, is it a land-based salmon farm of 20,000 metric tons? I don't know whether it's ambitious or it's just a media say, or because when I see that huge number, I mean that's just quite a big volume, as well as knowing that salmon is quite some value in terms of prices. This could be something that could really push up, aquaculture in SADC. I don't know your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Blessing. And the last one is Calicious.
Thank you, Doc. Good afternoon once again. Let me perhaps just take a moment to thank the team for, at least for now, I can say excellent work. Just in case I stumble on something, then I will withdraw that. I think really it's good work. I've really enjoyed looking at this kind of bottom-up approach in terms of the analysis and making up the case which we have. I think definitely a case has been made in terms of where the opportunities. So I look forward to the next webinar, which is really on the strategic aspect of it. So, but looking at the as we make up this case, of course, there are certain dynamics that we need to appreciate. And I think the presenter, Grant, made reference to some of this with regard to women and youth. I think this is really, critical in making up the case that we want to make. In other words, how does one motivate in terms of if we do this, this could be the impact on women and youth. Politically, these are big statements to be made in terms of, women emancipation and youth and whatever, but understanding where actually some of these segments of our society are. I mean, if we say youth, are youth interested in the upper segments of the value chain, lower, and so that we understand if we really promote this value chain, this is the impact we're likely to. So these are some of the discussions that I think really have to be built in as we go forward to make up this case. Related to that, of course, again, is the issue of jobs. I mean, I look at the volumes in terms of production. I look at the potential amounts to be made, which I think it's a very good, very resourceful presentation in terms of looking at, the value added at each segment of the value chain. But I think we are also interested to see the jobs component. How much are we likely to boost this going forward? Looking at the current, where are we likely to end up? Of course, it's not a straightforward prediction, but just to appreciate that. I think these are issues that we can use to really kind of push for decisions politically. Not that we have to make wild statements like typically people who say, I set up a business so that I can boost job creation, which is really nonsense. You set up a business to create wealth for yourself. But it's just to appreciate this dynamic associated with value chain development. So would perhaps something, in that line could be, I don't know where it can be inserted, but something for us to appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Calicious, Grant, and Tom.
Thank you. Thank you. I think just to run through some of the queries, the first point of discussion was on the issue of using indigenous and non-indigenous species, and I think, Tom, you are the best place to comment on that one.
Yes, thank you very much, Maury. It was good to hear that particular question. I think to a very large extent, these are decisions that are taken by or a consequence of policy decisions that are being taken by individual countries within SADC. So, for example, Mauritius has no qualms at all in, say, for example, producing red drum and also sea bass and sea bream. Obviously, there are very many advantages to that in terms of simply taking technology off the shelf and applying it in a different environment. For sure, there are environmental differences which need to be, where technologies need to be adapted, but to a very large extent, it does allow you to take technology off the shelf. Whether that is good or bad, well, put it this way: if we consider if we consider red drum, for example, red drum would not be able to reproduce in the wild in Mauritius. The temperature of the water is just too high, such that, and if one looks at the technology being applied, the hatchery technology is basically taking place in thermo-controlled environments in order to produce the eggs as well as the fingerlings. The same would go for, say, for example, sea bream. The temperatures, water temperatures in Mauritius are just too high. But it is ultimately up to the country itself to decide which way to go. Obviously, if you import fingerlings of a non-native species, then you do run the risk of bringing disease into your own waters. And hence the policy is to develop it through the importation of eggs and growing them out and having your own broodstock. As far as Seychelles, for example, is concerned, which is the exact opposite, Seychelles has taken a policy decision to only work with native species. This means that the production in Seychelles might not happen as rapidly as it did in Mauritius. But nevertheless, as I said, it's a policy decision. In South Africa, the same thing applies. At the moment, most of the species that are grown are native species. And if, say, for example, a non-native species such as Atlantic salmon is considered, it has to go through an extremely rigorous risk assessment prior to it being permitted as a species to be farmed. So yes, at this stage of the game, it's pretty much country decisions, but I think the decisions that have been taken have certainly gone through a rigorous debate prior to allowing the situation to happen as it is. I hope that answers the question, Grant, if you want to take it from there.
Thanks, Tom. I think that covers that one. The second question was really, if I can summarize it as such, the way in which small-scale production will ultimately be successfully incorporated into the overall plan for expansion of production in SADC. I think on that one, there isn't an easy answer, but I think what we have seen as a potential for working as exactly what was suggested is really the consolidation of smallholder operations into cooperatives, or merging into bigger, let's say, SSME commercial operations. Without a doubt, unless there is some consolidation which takes place. Those issues which are referred to, such as where does feed get produced, can it logistically be procured in, and along with other inputs to make production viable. These will be questions which go long unanswered. So, without a doubt, consolidation is a key mechanism to promote successful production at a smaller scale. And I think that is a little bit what we will start to address in the roadmap next week. But I think where governments can open up areas such as aquaculture development zones that would allow multiple smaller scale operators to consolidate together, which in turn would facilitate the production of feed locally, the development of value chains that can move outgoing product in bulk, and all in all allow a more viable economic solution. I think that's what needs to be considered. So consolidation, absolutely key. How is it done? I think governments have a key role to play in terms of opening up areas which are specifically demarcated for aquaculture development. So consolidation is the key, I think, is the answer there. The next question was regarding sea cucumbers and ornamentals. And I think, again, Tom, you're probably best placed to answer that one.
All right. As far as sea cucumbers is concerned, yes, there has been tremendous advances that have been made in Madagascar, and also there is work being undertaken at the moment in Zanzibar, and this is really a value chain that we have incorporated. It hasn't been mentioned here. It was part of the Kainoid value chain. It is extremely important for the simple reason that sea cucumber fisheries, wherever they are in the world, collapse. We don't have a single example of a sea cucumber fishery that has actually been managed in a sustainable basis. And this is very recent information published by John Purcell in Australia. So aquaculture, in fact, ranching of sea cucumbers is one of the ways in which one can contribute towards the market in the Far East. So yes, it is an important value chain, and it will be in the final documentation. As far as ornamentals is concerned, that was the question from Blessing. Ornamentals, yeah, at this stage of the game, there is a lot of talk about going into ornamental farming. But at the moment, in fact, the ornamental trade is to a very large extent based on capture fisheries of ornamentals, marine as well as freshwater, particularly in lakes such as Lake Malawi, Nyasa, and also in Lake Tanganyika, and where aquaculture facilities are used to hold fish prior to exporting, but there is no breeding taking place of any consequence within the SADC region. There might be a small koi industry in South Africa, but in terms of incorporating it as one of the key value chains is we found that was a little bit much. So yeah, I hope that sort of answers the questions. There was one other question, I think it was brought up by Calisius, and that's the issue of feed, and how does if a value chain develops, how do you dovetail that with the availability and demand for feed? Well, this has been a vexing question in aquaculture all over the world. It's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And quite frankly, there is a need for great, at this stage of the game, or what has happened is that there was always a great need for struggle by the producers to get up to a particular critical mass of production before any feed producer would come in and actually say, yes, this is of interest, and we will put up a feed factory. This is something that obviously, if one, say, for example, wishes to develop the tilapia value chain within SADC, this is something that one would now need to discuss with, say, for example, the 3 producers of tilapia feed, mainly in Zambia. So it's difficult, but we now have some feed manufacturers, big ones within SADC, and these, I think, will play a crucial role in developing the value chain as a whole.
I think, if I can, there was one further question regarding the proposed land-based salmon farm in Lesotho. I think when looking at the production of rainbow trout in Lesotho, there is one key issue which remains unresolved, and that is taking fish through the summer months where the surface temperatures in the dams exceed that which is really ideal for the production of rainbow trout. So the new project, which is, I think, more of a concept at this stage, is to rather move production onto a land-based setting such that water temperatures can be controlled more readily in tanks, and particularly by drawing water from lower down in the profile of the dam where the temperatures are cooler. The 20,000 tons, well, my comment on that would be yes, possible if the right size of fish can be produced. That would open up the opportunity to export out of the region, particularly to markets such as Japan. And I think under that assumption, 20,000 tons of production could be possible. 20,000 tons of production, however, on a land-based system would probably be the largest in the world at this stage. So I think the project is expansive in terms of its vision, but we have not taken that production to book it as yet, because I think it is really in the very early stages of planning, and there is still quite a long way to go, it seems. So we did note the project, but we decided to exclude that production at this point.
Thank you very much, Grant and Tom. Colleagues, any other question, comment, an observation? Beatrice. Beatrice?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello? Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Grant, thank you so much for that good presentation. And Mr. Motseki, also thank you so much. I just have one question. As you were doing that evaluation concerning the aquaculture zonation, whether it did came as a constraint within that evaluation or not, as we are developing, promoting the aquaculture in the region, some of the countries are hesitating really to sensitize the cage culture in the lake Tanganyika. Now I was asking if the aquaculture zonation did came as a concern so that it can promote the sector in the region. Hello.
Moteki, may I continue?
If I understand the question correctly, I'm going a bit deaf in my old age. The question was, would zonation contribute towards the development of aquaculture in our region? Was that correct?
Exactly.
Okay, let me put it this way. This is a very important question, and it certainly you will hear all about it in the third episode of this webinar series, where zonation is extremely important, particularly in developing aquaculture within the Great Lakes area, because there are very many instances of conflict, but there's also a huge opportunity. And zonation provides the mechanism whereby user conflict can be taken care of. In the same way, it is hugely important for the development of, say, for example, pond-based aquaculture with tilapia pond-based aquaculture within SADC, whether that is small scale or whether that is on a commercial industrial scale, doesn't matter. Zonation again provides the mechanism and the clustering of enterprises which can then make use of central services, whereby the cost of production by the individual then comes down. So zonation, yes, it's an absolutely hugely important factor in developing aquaculture throughout the region. And as I said, it'll be definite. It'll be strongly dealt with in the third webinar. Thank you, Beatrice, for that question.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Beatrice. Thank you, Tom. Any other question, or should I close this webinar? Grant, your parting shots.
No, I think thank you very much, Moteki. Thank you to all our participants. Like I said at the start, we've only been able to glance over the value chains because they are 24 in number, which is a lot to get through. But I would really encourage all the participants that when the final report is made public, that the detail within the report is nicely broken up into the value chains, and I really hope that that additional detail would help to guide decision making going forward. So I would encourage all the participants, please don't leave it at the presentation. It is just looking at the very most upper layer of the work which has been done. The detail is very important in all of these projects, in these investigations, and a lot of the enlightening issues which we've raised or uncovered in this process are actually contained in the report, and I think I would really encourage everyone to delve into that when the opportunity comes.
Thanks, Grant. I saw Prof. Emmanuel Kaunda wanted to say something.
Yes, it was just an addition, especially for you, Dr. Motseki. I think it's last year you were doing the role of fish, contribution of fish to nutrition in the SADC. And I think what is coming out here, the potential of aquaculture for 2030, if we do the development, has a huge impact on the nutrition for the region. So I thought this adds weight to the work which you were doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Kaunda. Any other parting shots, Prof. Tom?
No, I would just like to thank all the participants and thank you and your colleagues from WWF to assist us in making this work. Yeah, thank you very much, and looking forward to the one next week on Friday.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Grant and you, Prof, as well as my team in Maputo, Mozambique, WWF team. Thank you guys for your good work. And also thank everyone who participated today. Next week, 2 o'clock on Friday, we are having the third webinar. But also, I would like to remind those of you who can access a television set tomorrow at 3 o'clock. The head of UN will be giving a public lecture on the event of Nelson Mandela Day. And he's going to be talking a lot more about the pandemic of, not of COVID, but of inequality. And I think some of the work that we are doing revolves around us addressing regional challenges with regard to inequality. So I felt it was a good initiative that UN is bringing, and also on this glorious day of Nelson Mandela. So I hope you can tune in tomorrow, 3 o'clock, and there will be a lot of take homes, which I think will also help our work in the region. Thank you. Have a lovely weekend, and God bless. Stay safe. Triple S, sanitize, and safe social distancing. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Enjoy your weekend.
Bye.